My father crushes my dreams to protect the golden child and refuses to pay for my tuition, but I get my sweet revenge. I have a younger brother, 28, and we were raised by our dad, 56, ever since we were in middle school. My dad has always favored my brother over me, and with time, I got used to it. I was never the kind of son that my dad wanted because, unlike him, I had no interest in sports or doing the typical macho stuff that boys do. I was always more into more typically feminine things, which is why I was a huge mama's boy growing up. I loved everything to do with the kitchen, reading books, and even singing. My dad tried to make me play football with him, but I was no good at it, so gradually we grew apart. My brother, on the other hand, was exactly the kind of son that my father wanted. He was a rough and tough boy, not afraid of getting dirty while playing or even getting hurt. He was the perfect son for my dad, and it was very obvious that he loved my brother way more than he loved me. He'd always have great things to say about my brother but never me. My mother, however, never played favorites. She was fair to both of us, and that's why I loved her more as well. I did put in an effort to befriend my dad and spend time with him, but once we'd grown apart, he didn't seem too keen on fixing our relationship either. Unfortunately, the glue holding our messed up family together, my mother, passed away when I was in 8th grade. She'd been suffering from cancer, and by the time we realized it, it was too late for her to be saved. She was gone before we knew it. My mother's passing pretty much devastated me, and I kind of spiraled during that time. My only solace was the kitchen, and I'd whip up something new every day as if my life depended on it. My mother was a great cook, and she'd tell me often that had she not been forced into taking over her dad's business, she probably would have become a chef. So cooking was the only thing that brought me any comfort, since my dad and brother were no help in dealing with my feelings. They suppressed any emotional reaction they'd had to my mother's passing, and if anything, grew even more distant from me when, in normal families, something like this would have brought us closer. My fixation on cooking pissed my dad off even more, and he'd keep bugging me to get out of the damn kitchen and do something more manly. One day, when he'd had enough, he even told me that if he saw me in the kitchen again, he'd make me do all the other household chores as well. He told me to be more like my brother and man up, which ended in a huge fight where I told him he never loved me, and he agreed to it. It was finally out in the open, and I guess it was pretty much the last day that my father and I spoke to each other so openly, because after that, I stopped trying to win him over altogether, and he didn't seem to care about it either. For the next few years, I spent all the time I had in my room, listening to music and studying new recipes. I was determined to make this whole chef thing work out, not just for myself, but also for my mother. Meanwhile, my dad and I only spoke when it was absolutely necessary. My brother didn't care about me much either and ignored me, just like our dad did. So after my mom passed away, I basically had nobody I could count on. Finally, when it was time for me to apply to colleges, I decided to apply to a few of the top culinary schools as well as normal colleges, so that I'd at least have a shot. I didn't know if my dad would agree to it, but I had to try. At the very least, I'd already interned at a restaurant secretly that summer and had some experience. I had even managed to make them write a recommendation letter for me, which helped greatly. I ended up getting accepted into several of the schools I had applied to, including one of the best, which just so happened to be in France. I was thrilled that this was finally happening for me, but I was equally nervous since this would mean having to ask my dad for permission. I'd already made up my mind to beg him to let me go if he seemed reluctant, because I just absolutely had to make this happen for myself. I wasn't prepared to give up on my dreams under any circumstances. So I did tell my father about it eventually, and while I was ready for him to reject my request, saying that it wasn't a masculine profession, I was absolutely not prepared for him to decline paying my tuition at all. I still remember being really confused when he told me that he wouldn't be paying for my education at all, since it wasn't as if my dad was poor in the slightest. As a matter of fact, he was pretty well off and could easily afford to send me to France, but money wasn't the reason he wasn't ready to pay for my tuition. It was the fact that if I went to France and joined such a reputable school, it would make my younger brother feel insecure. He was struggling with his grades and couldn't bring himself to focus, so my dad wanted me to either go to community college or find a way to pay for my own tuition. I was astonished that he would do something so cruel to his own son and didn't know what to say to him. I tried to tell him that I needed this, but he was hell-bent and absolutely unwilling to pay for my tuition. He even told me that my brother's well-being was his topmost priority and that he didn't want me competing with his son. I could hardly even believe that this was happening because I couldn't imagine any other father in the world crushing their child's dreams like this just for their favorite. After a lot of pleading and sobbing, when he still refused to budge, I ended up getting into a huge fight with him where I said a lot of things to him and then left his house for good. I started living with my maternal aunt, my mother's older sister instead. The only reason I hadn't moved out earlier was because I found comfort in the house where I'd grown up with my mom, and also because I didn't want to change schools, which I'd have to do if I moved in with my aunt, since she lived pretty far away from the high school I went to. I told her all about my dad and how he'd outright refused to pay my tuition, and that I needed her help. It felt like crap asking her for a ton of money since she wasn't as rich as my dad, but she reassured me that she'd take care of all my expenses. Somehow, she managed to get all her friends to pitch in and sent me to the culinary school of my dreams, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. Once I got there, I worked part-time as well and tried to make the most of my time there to make all the money that was being spent on me worth it. I worked really, really hard and made my way up. When I graduated, I was one of the most skilled chefs there and even got a job just a few months after I graduated. I started working at a really high-end French restaurant, and I sent half of my salary back to my aunt to repay whatever debt I had. Slowly but steadily, I was just lucky that I didn't have to rely on a student loan, or maybe I'd never be able to pay any of it off. Anyway, I worked in France for a few years before finally moving back home, once I'd saved up enough to open up my own restaurant. It's been a couple of years, and in the meantime, I worked at another restaurant here as the head chef while also working towards my goal of opening up my own restaurant someday. It was all finalized a few weeks ago, and I was able to finally open up the restaurant I'd been working towards for so long. Two of my friends from back when I was in France also joined in on my business idea and became co-owners with me, which is why I was grateful when they allowed me to choose what we were going to name the restaurant. They happened to be from the same state, so we were all okay with opening our restaurant in my city of choice as well. I chose to name it after my mother, which was a really lucky coincidence for us since my mother actually has a really beautiful and uncommon name in the city we called our home. It was all finally falling into place. A few days back, we even had a little party for a few select guests before we were officially open for business. Of course, I invited my aunt and a few of her friends who'd also pitched in to help pay for my tuition. I also invited some of my friends back from school, but that was pretty much it. I didn't invite my father and brother because of obvious reasons. Even if I'd wanted to, I couldn't have since I hadn't spoken to them ever since I'd left home, and neither had they bothered to ever get back in touch with me. I guess all of us were better off this way, but I should have known that they would definitely show up to piggyback on my success someday. And that's exactly what happened. At the party we threw, they showed up an hour before the party was due to begin but weren't stopped by security since we shared the last name. They claimed that they were here to surprise me, and at least that bit was true. I was definitely surprised when I saw them. My dad and brother greeted me like nothing awful had ever happened in the past and were really warm towards me, probably for the first time in my entire life. I was shocked to see them, so I just froze when they first entered the restaurant. My buddies noticed that something was off, and after politely greeting my family, they left us on our own. I'm thankful that they were able to pick up on my discomfort. I still hadn't recovered from the shock of seeing them again when they dropped another bomb on me and showed me a gift that they'd brought for me. It was a portrait of my mother, and my dad even told me that he commissioned it for me to hang up in my restaurant. As soon as he'd heard that a new fancy restaurant with this name was opening up in our city, he'd known that it was definitely none other than his son. He even told me that he'd always known that I had it in me. My brother, too, was jumping on the bandwagon and praising me, telling me that he was immensely proud of me. I couldn't believe my ears and knew instantly that something was very strange about all of this. I didn't say much and kept waiting for them to get to the point because I knew there must have been a reason for them to be here. I let them speak, and eventually, they did get to the reason they were here. Apparently, my brother was working as a bartender now, and even that was possible just because my dad had managed to convince a friend of his to give him a job at his club. My brother's grades had kept falling throughout high school and college, and that's why he didn't end up in the high-paying positions my dad had always expected from him. On top of that, he'd also been slacking during his high school football games, which is why he wasn't able to get a sports scholarship either. Ironically, he's the one who ended up having to go to community college because he got rejected everywhere else. What they wanted me to do was make my brother a partner in the business so that he'd have a more respectable position, even though he had done absolutely zilch to deserve it. I had the urge to laugh in their face but somehow managed to hold back and instead told them that I'd think about it. I wasn't going to think about it though. I just didn't want to turn them away. I wanted them to stay for the party because I had a much better plan in mind, to humiliate my family, who'd come out of the woodwork as soon as they received word of my success. They seemed reasonably pleased, but boy, oh boy, they had no idea what was about to come. After a while, our guests started arriving, and in an hour or so, everyone we'd invited was there. I spent the evening socializing while my dad and brother also did the same, and I even heard them boasting about me to a few people while I marveled at their sheer audacity. Towards the end of the party, it was time for the hosts, namely me and my partners, To give a toast. My friends went first since I wanted to save the best for last. Then, finally, it was my turn to speak. That day, I was finally going to speak my heart out. I started off by thanking all my guests and raised a drink to my mother first since she was the reason I'd even ever been able to achieve so much. I strongly believed that it was her faith in me as a child that had made me believe I could do any of this at all, and that had stayed with me even after she was gone. After I'd paid my due respects, I decided to get to the real respect as well. I brought up how I'd had to take a loan from my aunt and her friends to go to culinary school and thanked her as well. Then finally, I got to the reason I'd had to take a loan for my tuition in the first place: my family. I brought up how I'd grown up with a father who never loved me or had any faith in me, and always berated me for having feminine interests like cooking. I had a younger brother who was the replica of my dad. I told them all about how my dad had refused to pay for my tuition out of fear that I'd end up becoming more successful than my younger brother, who was his golden child. This is why I ended up leaving home, but despite all odds, I was able to rise and become who I am today. So in a way, they did deserve some credit for creating all the hardships I've had to face. Otherwise, I never would have found out how resilient I was. A lot of people shot my dad and brother the nastiest looks they could manage while I was saying all of this, and even they had the good sense to at least look ashamed, even though I knew that they didn't feel that way in the slightest. Anyway, I then walked over to my dad and brother and actually hugged them, putting up the same pretense that they had when they visited me today. "Two can play this game," I announced. Because you'd shown up to celebrate my success today, I'd forgiven them for whatever had happened in the past, and I was even ready to give my brother the job of a bartender at my restaurant. To other people, this obviously seemed like a really emotional reconciliation, and they ended up actually clapping for me at the end of my speech. There were a few wolf whistles. Only my family and I knew that this was nothing more than an attempt to humiliate them, which I'd done quite successfully. But they had to smile and act like they were super grateful for what I'd done since they couldn't exactly storm out angrily, which is exactly what they wanted to do. After a while, when the crowd had cleared out and it was finally time for us to go home, my dad and brother confronted me right outside my restaurant. They were furious, and I swear there were angry tears in my brother's eyes. They demanded an explanation for what I'd done. If I'd never intended on making my brother a partner, then I should have just turned them away as soon as they arrived. I just laughed and told them that this was my form of paying them back for everything they'd done for me over the years. "This is exactly what you deserve." Then I walked away and didn't bother to look back, even when I heard my brother crying about how this was the cruelest thing, and even yelling after me to tell me that I'd regret this. But I didn't care since I was already in my car and was driving away. That happened a couple of days ago, and I haven't heard from them since. My aunt thinks that I might have gone a little too far with this one and should have just kicked them out at first, but I don't agree with her. This was well deserved. I'd had enough of humiliating my father and brother. Update 1. Hey, I decided not to reach out to my family to apologize, in spite of what my aunt had said about me being way too harsh. I don't feel sorry about what I did, so I'm not going to pretend I do and go out of my way to say so. They could have taken the opportunity to apologize to me when they visited me, but they didn't. I explained this to my aunt as well, and while she still believes I shouldn't have done what I did, she hasn't said much about it. I guess this is just one of those areas where we agree to disagree, and I'm okay with that. In other news, my brother has made sure that he goes behind my back to talk crap about me to all our friends from school. It's unfortunate that we went to the same high school, since this just means that random strangers from school are now texting to confirm the rumors that I'd humiliated and then kicked out my dad and brother from my restaurant after feeding them 3-day-old food on purpose. Yeah, he exaggerated the story to make himself seem like the victim, which is pretty unsurprising. Ordinarily, I wouldn't care about petty rumors, but I don't want potential customers taking these rumors seriously. So, I've texted my brother that if he doesn't stop spreading lies about me and my restaurant, then I'll make sure that he loses the job he has right now too. I'm hoping that it works because I really don't feel like dealing with their unnecessary crap right now. I'm really busy with work, and this just isn't the time. Update 2. LOL, my brother texted back saying that he was going to stop only when I'd make him a partner. I don't even understand what level of idiocy and delusion this is. Besides, if he wants to be a partner, then isn't it a pretty stupid idea for him to be talking crap about the same restaurant? I'm pretty sure this is my dad's tactic to ensure his darling son lands a high-profile job without doing any real work. But unfortunately, it's not going to work with me. I've told him that if he doesn't stop, then he'll be hearing from my lawyers and that he's in absolutely no position to be negotiating with me right now. The only reason I haven't done anything yet is because I don't want to get caught up in unnecessary drama, but I'll definitely mess him up if he tries anything funny after this, and he should take this as my last warning. I really hope he does, for his own good. Update 3. So, guys, it's been around a month since the last update, and since I've been really busy, I haven't been able to fill you in on what happened after that. My brother did stop talking crap about me behind my back, but they were still pretty desperate to join in on my success. So, my dad decided to pay me a visit with my brother a few weeks ago, just to intimidate me. They showed up at my house, threatening to sue me for using my mother's name for my restaurant, and even told me that they'd already spoken to a lawyer. So, if I didn't want any trouble, I needed to make my brother a partner as soon as possible. Obviously, I called their bluff immediately since no lawyer would take up such a stupid case. I think they were forgetting a very important fact. She was my mother too, and not just his wife. As far as I was concerned, no law could stop me from using her name. By then, I'd had enough of their bullcrap, so I told them that if they didn't leave me alone, they'd be forcing my hand, and I'd have no option but to call the cops. My brother lost his temper at that point and tried to grab me by the collar, but luckily, my dad held him back. I think it was the constant humiliation that had finally gotten to him and he'd snapped. Well, it wasn't my fault, and they were lucky that I didn't call the cops right then. I told my dad that he needed to get the hell out, but he only told my brother to go cool off in the car and that he wanted to speak to me in private. After my brother left, he tried to manipulate me by telling me that if my mother knew what I was doing to them, then she'd be really upset with me and I should bury the hatchet. At this point, I told him to leave me the hell alone because even I was at my limit. He couldn't just use my mother to get his way. That was just low. To be honest, we were way past the point of reconciliation. Not once had either of them apologized to me, even once, so I really didn't understand why they expected me to forgive them without even asking for it. As for what my mother would feel, I'm sure she would have felt equally let down back when my father had refused to pay for my tuition, and for that matter, every freaking time he made me feel awful about myself. So, he should be the last person to give me a sermon about what my mother would and wouldn't like. I know she's proud of me wherever she is, and nothing that my dad says is going to change that. At least my restaurant is doing well, and hopefully, we'll be able to expand soon enough. My boyfriend's meltdown over my friend's age turns into a breakup after his sexist comments and refusal to own up. Original post: I've been dating my boyfriend Mike, fake name, for about 4 months and everything has been great up until now. This post is gonna make Mike sound kind of crazy, but up till now he's been the nicest, most laid-back guy I've ever dated. About a week ago I was on a Zoom call with 2 of my friends, who we will call Annie and Sarah. Sarah is 27, Annie is 36. I was talking to Annie and Sarah and Mike leaned over my shoulder to say hello. Because of the pandemic he hasn't met either of them in person yet, and it was his first time actually meeting Annie at all. I wanted him to get to know my friends a bit, so I invited him to sit next to me and stick around. Sarah was talking about her dating woes and how the pandemic has made it harder to date than ever. Mike made this weird joke about how Sarah needs to find a guy quickly because at 30 she's gonna hit the wall and no man will want her anymore. He said it in this joking voice, but both Annie and Sarah looked weirded out. To be honest, Mike's never said anything like that before. I guess Mike picked up on the awkwardness because he started trying to explain himself and started saying all this stuff about how women age like milk and it's not the same for guys and men who tend to date younger because after 30 they hold all the cards and can pick and choose. Annie said, I haven't had any trouble meeting men. And Mike said, just wait until you hit 30 and lose your looks, it's all downhill from there. Annie just kind of laughed and I had to tell Mike that she's 36, and obviously hasn't lost her looks if he's mistaking her for a 20-something. I said it kind of jokingly, but Mike just went silent and then walked off into my bedroom and slammed the door. That night and ever since then he's been very moody and short with me, and keeps making passive-aggressive comments about how I'm always against him and never have his back. We've never even had an argument before this, so I don't know where that's coming from. I've tried to bring up the Annie thing several times and he either clams up and refuses to talk about it or turns it back to me, Annie and Sarah ganging up on him and bullying him, which I don't think any of us did. The rest of the time he's just very short with me and keeps picking fights over tiny stupid things like my tone of voice being wrong. What do I do here? I really want to talk about what happened and about his views on women and men and aging because that's kinda concerning. I don't understand why my sweet cool boyfriend has suddenly transformed into this weirdo because he got politely corrected once. How should I solve this? TLDR. Boyfriend started talking about how my friend would be washed up when she hits 30. I told him she's 36 and he's been in a bad mood ever since. What should I do? Relevant comments. Kifale shot 123 WTF. Sounds like your BF is a shallow pause. I mean, he was seriously looking for you to back him up that older women always fall apart. If that's what he really thinks, then your relationship is over in 2 years anyways. Smack up upside the head, tell him to grow up, and y'all can move on from this. This the dumbest non-issue I've ever heard in my life. Your boyfriend is being a bitch and he sounds like the type of person that is loaded up with double standards. Oh. That went through my mind too and is part of why I want to talk to him about this, because if he really thinks women are washed up after 30, then what does that mean for our relationship? Spoem lol, he sounds like a sexist dumbass and that he's upset he got proven wrong? Oh, p. What's weird is he's never shown any hint of being sexist before this. If you'd asked me before all this, I would have told you he was a very modern and progressive guy, and it's not like we've never discussed things where he could have shown these kinds of views before. We discussed stuff like abortion and women's reproductive rights early on, and he was all about a woman's right to choose, for example. This just seems like it came from nowhere. Tasty units. How is this loser even attractive to you? I hope you talked to Annie and apologized for his behavior. If I were Annie, I would be incredibly disappointed in you. OP. I stayed on the Zoom call with Annie after he stormed off, so we already talked about it, and I basically said the truth, which is that he's never ever said anything like that before and I wouldn't date him if he had. Annie seemed to find him saying all that stuff then getting her age wrong incredibly funny actually, but yeah, I did apologize for what Mike said to both her and Sarah. Deleted. Once I heard the phrase, when people show you who they really are, believe them, it changed my life. Listen to who he is showing you he is OP. Edit. To give credit, it's a Maya Angelou quote. Thanks to everyone that told me. OOP. I think I'm going to take your advice. It makes me sad because he really seemed so great up until now, but I guess this is a lesson to me that you can't always trust the first impression you get of someone. I texted him that I want to talk, so I guess either he can respond and we can have an actual adult breakup in person, or he can keep ignoring me and get dumped by text tomorrow. Update. First of all, I want to say thank you. I didn't expect my post to get such a big reaction, but seeing everyone basically unanimously tell me Mike was bad news was the wake-up call I needed. As a matter of fact, it was actually Sarah who told me to make the post. She didn't like Mike at all after that Zoom call, and I had been kind of pushing back when she suggested I end the relationship. She didn't sound surprised at all when I told her Reddit unanimously said he was bad news. I think she was probably thinking I told you so. I also called my dad after the Reddit post, and something he said basically cemented my decision to end it with Mike. He and my mom are the same age and have been happily married for 30 years. He said, if you stay with this man, then on your 30th birthday, you're going to be worrying he'll never find you beautiful again instead of celebrating the milestone. Don't waste your time with someone like that. Every time your mom has her birthday, I feel happy that she's choosing to spend another year growing older with me. And basically, that's what I want, and obviously I wasn't going to have that with Mike. Anyway, long story short, I did break up with Mike. I texted him asking to meet up and talk, and when he asked what about, I told him we needed to discuss the Zoom call and how he'd been acting this week. I got more of the same stuff about how I'm a bully and ganging up on him, and he wants an apology from me, and even though I had wanted to do the breakup in person, I realized he was going to keep trying to turn it around into being my fault, so I just told him over text that I didn't want to see him anymore. He sent back, whatever. Grow up. And hasn't contacted me since. So that's that. Not a very interesting update, I know. But even though a big explosive argument might have been a more interesting update, I'm kind of glad to have avoided it. TLDR, I broke up with Mike. Relevant comments. Theora4545. Good thing done. Now for her to reconcile with her friend and tell her dad what great support they both are. OP. Sarah's not mad at me, fortunately. We actually had a call just before I made this update, but I can tell she was holding back the urge to say she told me so. And to be fair, she did tell me so. Pookie582. I'm sorry it had to happen, but I am relieved this is the outcome. I hope you find someone a million times better. Also, I love your dad. He sounds like a great husband and a great father. Ope. My dad's amazing, and he and my mom are still so crazy about each other. They've always been marriage goals for me. My wife wants a divorce because I live an entirely different reality with my first love in my dreams. Original post. I, M31, have been with my wife, F28, for 3 years. We had a short engagement, married quickly, and had a perfectly ordinary existence. I love her, she loves me. We do taxes, housework, watch movies. All the normal things. No physical cheating on either side as far as I know. But here's the thing. I am a lucid dreamer, which means I can, to an extent, control my dreams, which is something I find cool as it allows me to go on adventures while asleep. It also makes scary dreams not so bad because I can just wake myself out of them. Over the last year or so I've been having a recurring dream about my ex, my first love, F29. Truth be told, I never got over her. We were together for 5 years from 15-17 to 2022. We broke up after I graduated from college because she didn't want to move from New York to South Carolina with me, which is where the biggest industry for my field is. I was crushed but moved on, and we've spoken sporadically over the years, although we never crossed any lines. I will admit that I've kept up with her own social media a bit, but nothing stalkerish. Well, a year ago she announced she was getting married, and I experienced a resurgence of feelings for her, although I never acted on them or told her. That same night, I dreamed about her for the first time in years. In the dream, she showed up at my door and asked me if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes, of course. The dream, which was not a lucid dream, ended there. It felt so real, I couldn't shake the feeling once I woke up. It felt like we were actually reconnecting. Since then I've dreamed about her several times a week, and I've practiced becoming lucid, so I've been able to control the outcome more times than not. We've lived a whole life together over the past year. Everything from dates to a trip to Paris together, which we visited while in college. We even rewalked the same paths we did in real life. It got to the point I was looking forward to going to sleep to be with her. Fast forward to today, my wife told me she felt distant from me. And I started to feel guilty because I thought what I was doing was harmless, but she's obviously noticed a change in me. So I confessed. About all of it. At first she said that I was joking, but when she realized I was serious, she accused me of cheating on her and told her mom and sisters, who are calling me a cheating weirdo. She even threatened to tell my ex so she'll know what a fucking loser I am. Now I get that it's not anything a woman would want to hear, but it's not like I physically cheated. I don't want to lose my wife, but I don't think she can forgive me for this. TLDR, I live an entirely separate life with my ex in my dreams, and now my wife wants to divorce me. But I really love her and don't want to lose her. Do we have a chance? Relevant comments. Sulangelic. Yeah, no, I think this might be a lost cause. I would certainly consider this cheating, and I think that it does indeed warrant a divorce. You clearly don't really love her, at least, not as much as you love your ex. Oh, I do love my wife, which is why I married her. I just also have feelings for my ex, which I should have been honest about before we got married. I didn't mean for this to happen, but once it did, I wasn't able to stop it. Living that life with my ex while sleeping felt like getting to experience what I missed out on in young adulthood. With that said, my wife left overnight for a hotel, and I don't know if she's coming back. I feel awful for hurting her. Elzabot, I'm asking this genuinely, not trying to be snarky at all. What did you think your wife's reaction was going to be? Did you expect what happened, or did you think she would be more accepting? I knew she would be upset, but I felt I owed her an explanation once she communicated that Du felt distant. I didn't want to gaslight her perception. I just hadn't known that she even noticed a difference in me. I just didn't think she would leave. She's turned off her location. I have no idea where she is or if she's all right, and her family won't speak to me now. I do love her and would like for our marriage not to end, but that seems inevitable now as I process this. Update. 2 days ago, I posted about the fallout that occurred after I, 31, admitted to my wife, 28, that I've been lucid dreaming about my ex and first love, 29, over the past year. After a major blow-up, where my wife called me every name in the book, and got her family involved, which I understand completely, so please don't take this wrong, my wife left. I didn't know her whereabouts for over 24 hours. Early this morning about 3 a.m., she came home and told me she wanted to file for divorce. She didn't want to have to compete with a phantom, and deserved better than a shitbag like me. But she doesn't want to move out or start the process because it's a pandemic, and she doesn't want to live on one income. We make roughly the same amount of money. Me $90,000 a year after taxes, and her $85,000. I tried to apologize to her for all the hurt I caused by making her feel like she wasn't enough, to assure her that I do love her even though I still love my ex, and explain to her that I've never physically cheated or had any inappropriate conversation with my ex. But she won't budge. She doesn't want me anymore. I can't blame her. I was selfish and I shouldn't have carried on what I now accept to be a one-sided emotional affair. So I agreed to stay together, for financial purposes, for 2 years, or until the pandemic is over, whichever comes first. But she kicked me out of our bedroom and basically claimed the second floor for herself. There's so much tension in the house right now, so I left as soon as the sun came up and went to a coffee shop to do some work. While there, I received a message on IG from my ex that my ex-wife sent her a long message from her own account telling her about everything that I told her. I froze because I hadn't spoken to her in a long time. But she saw that I had read the message and followed up an hour later, telling me she needed to know the truth. So, again, I confessed, expecting to be berated and called a loser again. Because I had nothing else to lose. But she didn't think that my dreams about her were weird or creepy. She thought it was sweet that I still loved her, especially with her knowing that I'd never tried to have inappropriate conversations or force my way into her life. I'm aware that her not condemning my actions doesn't make them right or take away from the hurt I caused my wife, but knowing she didn't think negatively of me made me feel better. We messaged back and forth for a couple of hours, talking about our relationship and how it ended and the choices we made. In that, I learned that she and her fiancé called off their engagement a few months ago. I also told her my wife was going to divorce me because of the revelation. She expressed her condolences and that was the end of the conversation. I'm home now and I can't help but wonder if this is the universe's way of putting my ex and I back on the path to reconciliation. Hate me if you want, but I made a mistake and I hurt my wife and my marriage is over now. Or going to be. But knowing that the person I ruined my marriage over doesn't think I'm the scum of the earth is worth its weight in gold. I don't know what will happen now. But I can't imagine a friendship with my ex won't blossom from this, at the very least. I know this won't make my wife happy since she contacted my ex to further shame me, but I may just not tell her. We are, after all, divorcing. I hope the next few months and years can result in healing for both my wife and myself, and that we'll both live happy, fulfilled lives. TLDR, I live an entirely separate life with my ex in my dreams and now my wife wants to divorce me. Now my ex and I have reconnected. Relevant comments, deleted. I hope you don't take it out on her when you realize that your old flame isn't the person she was in your dreams. Because that was you. You were in love with another version of you. She'll be someone else entirely. Oh, but I'm also a different person. And I wasn't in love with myself. The love for her influenced the dreams. Deleted. When I say she'll be someone else entirely, I don't mean that your ex will have changed since you last knew her. I mean that your ex, in actual, real life, will be someone other than the person you spent so much time with in your dreams. That person in your dreams was not your ex in any meaningful way. She was an amalgamation of your memories of her, patched together using new material you created out of whole cloth to please yourself. She won't ever be able to live up to the fantasy you constructed, because the fantasy woman was you. The things she did and said were things you invented, just like every character an author writes is a version of themselves. You've invested countless hours and serious emotion into a character you created, who is really only loosely based on your ex. Since a real woman can't read your mind like a dream character can, and because a real woman doesn't exist only to make you happy, she will not, in real life, be the same person from your dreams. That may be disappointing to you when you realize it, so try not to take it out on the girl. OP fair. But I'm not expecting her to be. The dream could never compare to the warmth and love she radiates in real life. It was a coping mechanism. Real life will be better. I love sharks 101. You sound absolutely obsessed with this woman, and to be honest it's quite disturbing. I imagine much of who she is has changed over the years. What if she's not the person you remembered? She will never compare to the fantasy, and honestly your obsession over her perfection is rather frightening. Sister had an affair with my fiancé months before our wedding. Mom knew and said nothing. Now, my sister's pregnant, crying over online hate. I'm a woman in my 30s here. My sister is only a year older than I am. It was painful to learn about this one because our relationship has always been so positive. She could have as easily stabbed me in the heart. In addition, my fiancé and I have been together since high school and have supported one another through good times and bad. In a few months, we were to tie the knot. Why in the world they did this to me is beyond me. Even worse, our mother was aware of it, and my sister reportedly pleaded with her not to speak out of concern that she would become involved. She said nothing to me. My dad, fortunately, couldn't stand it and told me the truth. Never in my life have I been so furious. I chose to harm my sister in another way in addition to evicting my fiancé and discarding some of his belongings in the trash. Why not give my fiancé the same treatment? Easy. My sister and I had always gotten along well until she decided to sabotage our relationship months before my wedding, which I had let her attend as a bridesmaid. That's not something you do to anyone, much less your sister, your blood. Being an avid gardener, my sister created a garden for her dog after he passed away. I went to knock on her door. Naturally, I played nice, and she was unaware that I knew. I proceeded to discuss her actions with my fiancé, and I caused little harm to her garden. To be honest, I only smashed a few flowers. Do I apologize? Her justification pushed me over the edge. The excuse, "it just happened," is insufficient. I suppose that's just how my fiancé and I ended up sleeping. I informed her that I no longer wanted her to communicate with me and that I also did not want her mother to do so. Since I vowed to call the police if he ever came near me again, my fiancé has refused to speak. I feel like I should be crying, but I'm happy that I made my sister cry and yell at me. She understood the significance of marriage to me, and I am now unable to have that experience. Combine that with the fact that my dad, not my pathetic sister or fiancé, had to tell me this. Hell, not even my own mother spoke to me. She seems to let my sister live her life as she pleases. Tia, fuck you. Logan, fuck you. I would be overjoyed if they ever saw this. Edit 1. I'm disappointed that I lost the connection I've always given my all to, as a lot of people keep bringing it up. Naturally, I was eager to get married, but then this information was revealed. I was deeply hurt by it. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I nearly believed my father was deceiving me. It proved to be true later. I swear that now I have trust difficulties. Edit 2. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their suggestions. I feel more comfortable revealing them because of it. I will do my best to provide an update, but I am currently a ball of nerves because I know that when I do, it will go horribly wrong again. It's the least you guys can expect, hey. Last edit, I kind of ruined something really important to her, which is why I say I chose to hurt her. That seems like it would be a bit far for most folks outside of here, but that's just how I feel. I know it's not what you guys were hoping for. LOL, obviously it took some effort, though, because she believed I was incredibly insane for doing so. As I already stated, I have no remorse for causing her such pain. I apologize for my awful mood. I will undoubtedly expose them at some point today. The OP's response in the comments was, expose them to everyone and ruin them. OP. After I finished dealing with my sister, I truly contemplated doing this. To show her what the rest of the world thinks of her trashy ass, I could unblock her, if nothing else. But really, I still find it hard to believe she treated me in this way. Commenter. Have them exposed. They will attempt to reframe it and paint you in a negative light. Inform your extended family, his family, and your mutual friends. Inform them that you have severed all communication with them and that you hope to never see them again. OP. His sister was the only person that contacted me regarding this yet. What the hell happened? She asked me in a fit of hysteria. Uncertain about the rest of the family, she is totally on board with me in this. But right now, my father is the only person I can truly trust. Most likely, she does too. Commenter. What a terrible thing. What time did this occur? I'm shocked by your mother. OP. Over the last weekend, I discovered how my dad conveyed it to me in another comment I wrote. My sister allegedly made the decision to inform my mother. It's clear that she wanted her to remain quiet about it. My dad told me after my mom reportedly told him over the weekend, but not immediately. The problem is that I don't even know when they had sex. Neither my parents nor I were informed of that. It appears that my sister may have continued to hide this information for an indeterminate amount of time before deciding to tell my mother the truth. They might have done it multiple times, or even months ago, for all we know. I find it difficult to believe my fiancé, who has repeatedly denied ever having slept with her. I can't seem to grasp why my mom did what she did, yet a tiny part of me keeps attempting to defend it. She obviously didn't give a damn. OP. On social media, everyone is aware that the wedding has been cancelled. I apologized in a post for calling off the wedding, but I've disabled notifications because I continued receiving a ton of messages inquiring about what had happened. My cousin and his sister are the only ones who currently know. At the time, I couldn't even bring myself to speak to anyone else. I was really ill. However, these remarks are incredibly enticing and are giving me ideas. Update 1. Hey everyone, it appears that my previous post was removed. Once again, I appreciate your support and remarks. I learned a good deal. First of all, I did share my tale with her and my ex. To tag them, I unblocked both of them. A special thanks goes to the commenter who jotted down my appropriate response. I composed it, saved it, and added a few more words of my own. After seeing my story, my ex truly blocked me. After that, I forwarded my Reddit post to my sister. She didn't see at the time, but my ex's mother called me. She asked me how I was doing and whether I had heard the news, even though she was upset about everything. Sincerely, I couldn't stand to hear any more terrible news, so I felt a little sad. I questioned her about what she was discussing. So you haven't heard? She asked. I asked her to tell me, and I replied no. My sister is expecting a child. Logan reportedly told her this to try to get her to stop bothering my sister. I told her I had to end the call since I didn't want to hear from her any longer. I literally started crying 2 seconds later, so I'm glad she agreed. OP. My sister replied to my text and tale with the Reddit post link 2 minutes after I had been crying for 5 minutes. She begged me to remove it in a text message that was all uppercase. I would have chuckled a little if I wasn't so unhappy, but instead I just sat there and watched her destroy my phone. When she responded, "I'm coming over, and I'm telling Mom that you're spreading my business online," I became even more irate. "Okay, you huge kid?" But I never answered. Even yet, I felt immobilized. OP. She's attempting to break down my door 30 minutes later. In a flash of rage, I opened it and began yelling at her in various, expletive forms. I informed her that it would remain up for as long as I wanted it to, despite her constant cries for me to take it down. She insisted that she didn't deserve the abuse she received online, and she even attempted to reassure me that she would have forgiven me if it had been the other way around, and that she had always supported me through everything. I punched her at that moment. A tiny part of me felt bad. My last post undoubtedly made it clear that I'm not the fighting kind. Funny, but in response, she said, "It's not my fault." When Logan had had enough of you, I told her that I hoped she would end up like her dog and that she deserved all the criticism she was receiving for destroying my relationship. I even said I was sorry I didn't wreck her entire garden and her foolish face. She was playing the victim the entire time, and I see now that I'm terrible for saying this. She told me to rot in hell and referred to me as vile. She insisted that I was punishing her for an error. I replied, "You have no idea what you've put me through, and I know you would have done the same thing if you were the victim." I had the audacity to punch her in the face and let strangers criticize her online, and she continued to cry and abuse me because all she had ever done was be there for me through everything. I told her that I didn't want her to speak to me ever again and that she deserved it. "I'll call the police if she gets close to me." I refused to put up with her constant accusations that I was being incredibly unjust and that she apologized in her texts. I instructed her to let Mom know that I wouldn't be speaking to her ever again. I urged her to go home and wished her luck with her unwanted child when she inquired if I was really going to cut her off like that. She didn't leave my porch again after that. In any case, it doesn't even matter that I had to clean my favorite vase. They're at least no longer in my life. But I'm feeling strangely depressed right now. I'll never feel the connection we shared again, but it's for my own good, damn it. Positively, I feel like I've escaped 2 gunshots. But once again, thank you everybody, perhaps I do require therapy. Last edit. My mother claims that my expletive sister is crying uncontrollably over cruel individuals on the internet, so my dad contacted me a short while ago and asked me to remove every post. Like I'm removing something. My mom keeps defending her by suggesting that we should take it easy on her, even though my dad is furious about her pregnancy. I'm not speaking to her because of this. But once again, thank you everybody. I have other things to worry about, and I'm tired. Update 2. I have formally made the decision to accompany my dad to LC today. He wasn't really angry about it, which surprised me. He is still on the take down the posts team, though, which is why I decided what to do. Since there would be no need in attempting to reach me if I didn't respect the family, my mother doesn't want anything to do with me. Whoa, that almost seems like what I wanted. I've been getting support from my cousin and the sister of my ex. Since more people are gradually learning about the affair, both in person and online, my sister has apparently suffered meltdown after meltdown. She really got into an online argument with my cousin, and my cousin claims that my sister keeps pleading with her to tell me to remove the posts because she feels guilty and under pressure to do so. My ex's sister was the last person to tell me about him. She informed me that they did talk and that he doesn't feel comfortable leaving my pregnant sister alone, even if he isn't ready for a child. Additionally, he wants me to quit what I'm doing, but anyway, they were meant to be together. Surprisingly, my cousin and my new sister, as I like to refer to my ex's sister now, have helped me feel a little better. Actually, I've had a decent night's sleep. Still thinking about going to therapy. Despite my last interaction with my sister, I will always mourn the bond I had with them, and a very small part of me feels terrible about exposing my sister and ex. However, they deserve it because they have harmed me. It's their problem if they're not handling it well. Once again, thank you everybody. Am I the asshole for setting boundaries with my son's fiancée and refusing to accept her as a family due to her constant manipulation and pressure? Original post. I, 41M, have 2 kids with my ex-wife, 42F, a son John, 22, and daughter Sally, 20. I'm remarried to my wife, 28. I'm very close with my kids. My son is engaged to Abby. She seems nice but has been a bit pushy trying to create relationships with me and my wife, though she's also awkward with her. Abby isn't close to her family. She told us many stories why, and while some of her complaints don't seem awful, it's not my place to judge and I didn't live it so I can't know anyway. We've tried to be welcoming, but Abby has forced her way into some family traditions where she wouldn't have been invited, and some where no one outside of a specific family would have. She has been calling Sally sis since they were only dating a few months, has an odd sister/mother-in-law thing she does with my wife, and the one I'm not a fan of, wants me to be like father to her. Not because we've clicked or anything. We are very different people. Not saying that in a bad way, just saying it's not based on how we get along or anything. My kids and I have a tradition when they come over that we have a private catch-up in my office study before they leave, which is now even more important to them because while they both get along well with my wife, they don't want to have personal conversations around her yet. Abby asked if we could talk, and after I explained the tradition, John later asked that I do it, saying she'd never had a caring conversation with her dad. We compromised that I didn't include her in the tradition but did join the two of them for coffee and let her talk. Then she started calling me dad. They weren't even engaged yet. John pulled me aside and begged me to give her that. Laid this whole thing on me about me always being the dad she always wanted right in front of her and she just wanted that. Told me she cried watching me and Sally together. She still gives me random hugs. I'm a lucky dad. I didn't like it, but I do feel bad, so I gave her that. She wants me to walk her down the aisle in the father-daughter dance. I don't want to walk her down, and I walk with a cane, so dancing is hard. At my own wedding I only danced twice. John is begging for me to do one, preferably the aisle. They came over Sunday. John and I were talking. I thought to address it, when Ab walked in without knocking, asking if he'd told me yet. I asked what John said she wanted me to say about having a second daughter now in my speech and how I loved her. I just looked at him. She asked if I'd do the walk and dance for Sally. I said of course. She yelled she's my daughter too, and I said it will never be the same, Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain that I'd talk about her being a happy addition to the family and I love how happy she makes Jack, which I thought was a good compromise. But she started crying. John apologized and they left, but he called me when they were home, nearly begging me to. AITA because I won't lie and say I love her or she's my daughter. Update 1. I had planned on writing this sooner, but life got in the way in a couple of really good ways, but people were helpful and asked for updates, and I have a surprise-free day, so here it goes. On Mother's Day my kids and their partners go to visit my ex-wife. So it turns out my ex-wife and Abby are a lot closer than I realized. She calls her mom, which is part of where this comes from. Also apparently my ex has been egging it on. On Mother's Day they were talking about the wedding and I guess whenever Abby referred to me it was as dad. My son apparently told her to let it go, which led to yelling. Abby about deserving to be my daughter, ex telling her that she's right. Son telling her that I am trying and she should be realistic about things. Sally telling her I only had one daughter, which was apparently a response to Abby saying to her that as my daughters, they should be united. According to my son Abby was crying, according to Sally she was crying and yelling and kicked something before going to her room, and Sally told me she went off on her mom, but will not elaborate so I don't know what was actually said. But knowing Sally, hoo boy. Around 2 a.m. I got a text from Sally's partner's phone saying Abby really is great, she hasn't been perfect but you should give her a chance and you will learn to love her. I saw it when I woke up. I tried to text her back but was blocked, so I called Sally but they were driving. They stopped by my place later that day because I am on the way and my daughter prefers my liquor and cooking and they told me about the night before. At the end I asked to speak to her partner alone. I asked if I had done something to upset her. She was confused and I told her I was blocked. She said I wasn't but checked her phone and I was, and I said it was after her message and she asked what message. I showed her, it was not on her phone anymore. At that point we brought in Sally and caught her up, neither of them were happy. A couple of days later, John and Abby dropped by unannounced. Not something we really do in this family, but okay fine, I had mad salmon, does not take long to cook. I cook 2 more, and my wife serves while I make drinks. The entire night was Abby trying to bring up the wedding. John trying to change the subject, Abby not allowing that. We talk logistics because I am helping them get some good deals through some professional contacts I have when finally she just says so I was talking to mom, she said that you can walk me down the aisle and she'll do the dance, or you can dance and she'll walk, it's your call but you need to choose soon. I reiterated that I could not dance. She tried arguing that I had danced a little at my wedding but I made it clear that is different, and did not feel comfortable walking her. She got upset and said, Mom loves me, why can't you? I felt bad but couldn't lie. I pointed out that she had John who loved her, my ex-wife, friends, she had people who love her. She said but other than, ex-wife, those aren't my parents. I said neither am I. She was very emotional so my wife and I gave them a few minutes. My son and I were alone later, he looked exhausted. He said the problem was that after Mother's Day Abby had called Sally and kept saying they are both my daughters, that I did not get to be close with one but not both, and that it was them against me. But at that one Sally cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Things were said, grievances were aired. John had to hang up before it got worse, but I guess Abby was shaken, but there was a new problem. Abby had decided in her head that I did not mean what I have been saying and was just doing it for Sally. He told me he would handle it. Ron Howard. He did not. So now I get text messages from Abby every couple of days acting like we have a secret relationship Sally doesn't know about. She even called herself my secret daughter and lolled. She invited my wife to lunch, saying 2 out of 3 of his girls going out. She has even started using the pressure of showing up at events like a recent barbecue to play a certain image. She hugs me more and holds it, wants to take pictures with just me or my wife and I, but always a few with just me to post with captions I do not like. My wife is getting especially annoyed because of how she is with her. I guess Abby surprised her with Father's Day plans for me that had to be shut down. As it is, she still inserted herself into the day, but she has a soft spot for her, and when Abby gets emotional she caves. My wife is a sweetheart. I asked him if he was upset with me and he said no, he just wished it was different. He said we're good, but he's worried he and Sally aren't, which is when I took the advice of some people and suggested premarital counseling. He said he would talk about it. Abby is insisting Sally go to her fitting. That shop should pay-per-view that potential Royal Rumble because Sally is not holding her feelings back anymore. I told him Sally loves him and I'll talk to her, but for now it is stressful all around. Abby driving my wife crazy with her ideas for what my girls should be doing, driving me crazy with dad-daughter content, drove Sally to the edge, and oh yeah, last night sent me an email with 3 styles of father-daughter dances and song options, so I'm not feeling any more respected or heard than before. The 6 of us have barely been in the same room in order to let things calm down since Father's Day, which was great until it was a shit show. Sorry this is so long, with all the craziness this is still the abridged version. We are supposed to meet Friday. Sally's partner and I have a bet going about how bad it will go. So onward and upward. I hope you fathers had a less dramatic day than I did, and by any chance does anyone know exactly how bad of a crime I need to commit to enter witness protection? Just curious. Update 2. I have gotten requests for updates on my situation, and as I enjoy a refreshing mojito and my wife her mojito, life feels good and the perfect time to amuse the world with my pain and familial drama. Plus a cousin of mine who apparently reads these and knows my situation gave me the convincing argument of dude, you can't keep people hanging. And how can I argue with that airtight argument? I apologize for how long this is, a lot has happened. My wife's pregnancy is going well, keeping her as stress-free and pampered as possible has been my focus. It is such a different experience this time, both because of how much more involved I can be and how much better a relationship I have with my wife than I had with my ex. My daughter Sally has been great, even her partner has been great, helping with the nursery or driving her around when I can't. My wife doesn't know because it is a surprise, but my son has been building a crib for the baby, modeled after the one I built for him and his sister, to show my wife his support. My son is a good man, and he is still in there, he just has a soft spot for Abby. Which I guess gets us to the part of the movie where Godzilla shows up and starts busting up buildings. So I called a family meeting with my kids to talk about the situation. Told John his sister was only doing wedding activities she wanted to and that the guilting request needed to stop, that this was hurting his relationship with his sister. Sally was happy I said it so she did not have to yet again. I told him if he did not stop her from messaging me I would block her with a bluntly honest explanation why. We got a lot out, John seemed to understand, but then a few days later they insisted on coming to talk. Sally and I decided we would get everything out. So all of us ate at our place. Abby started in immediately about baby shower stuff and I told that is the kind of thing we wanted to talk about. I told her that I understood she has been trying to fill a hole that she has, that she thought she was getting a father, a second mother, she calls my ex-wife mom apparently, and a sister. I told her it was still possible but that she needed to start listening to us. I told her that for the sake of family we would give her a fresh start, if she agreed that moving forward she would respect our boundaries. My daughter did not love this idea but loves her brother and was willing to try. Abby tried to say that since we were starting over we could define what the relationship would be and just be family. We told her we were not ready for that it needs to happen organically. She got mad that I am closer with my daughter's partner, which is true but we just get along, and that she deserved it for trying so hard. My daughter said something about trying things we actually want. She ran to our bathroom, he ran after her. After a while I checked on him. I could hear her repeating, "This is not what I wanted." My wife, daughter and her partner went out to the patio to give them privacy and salvage the night. After a bit I got a text saying they had just left. I checked in with him the next day and he said they talked more at home and she understood. For a couple of weeks things were good. The text stopped except the occasional wedding question, since it was getting closer. She stopped pushing herself on my wife and Sally, and we thought was involving us in less in wedding planning out of respect, since as it was they only got the venue at the rate they did because of my professional connections and they know I was willing to help but not interested in helping plan, even if I'm good at event planning. But then I got a call from the venue telling me the card I used had been declined. Now this is a specific card I use for big purchases because of the miles, so I knew it had a high limit. That was how I learned that they had changed dates by 2 months despite being informed I would still be out much of the money because it was too close to the date. I was furious. I mean, I have been lucky in life financially, but I am not blow off deposits like nothing wealthy. Called my son, said he needed to get his ass to the house, just him. They both came. When they arrived I opened the door. She actually started with, "Dad." I think I just replied, "You have got to be fin kidding me," and walked toward the table. Abby had the nerve to ask where dinner was. My response was not polite as I made it clear that was not why they were here. I hoped my son would not lie to me, so I asked what was going on with the venue. She started going into wedding details, but my son interrupted to tell me they postponed because my ex-wife was unavailable because of a surgery and he had not told me because he was putting money together to pay the lost money himself, and he had just reached out to guests to let them know. And that is when Abby's mouth opened. "We have extra time to work on our dance." Now during this time my wife came home, and I was walking her toward the bedroom when Abby said that. My pregnant wife with me said, calmly, "I have different feelings about that and will elaborate further shortly," or something like that. Then I laid my wife down and got her water, turned on her symphonic covers of popular songs and walked back to the table and said something like, "You are out of your fee and mind, have you ever been listening?" I made it clear I was done with this nonsense, we all were. And kind of lost it asking she did not hear us last time because her head was up her ass. She was stunned silent, "What a beautiful sound," and looked at me while I, admittedly with little filter, explained what Sally and I thought of our time with her and her attempts to force us to love her without even getting to know us. She started crying and stood up and shouted, "Then what was this even for?" John asked what she meant, if she meant them, and he started to freak out. She was frantic and said she meant delaying the wedding. Because, and I'm pouring another drink to write this, it was a ploy. My ex-wife and her decided if I had more time I would come around. Apparently my ex told her not to worry about the money because I am loaded. She has always been bitter. I make so much more than I did when we were married, as if that is out of spite rather than my career arc. I think she did that on purpose, frankly. But she not only told me that lie, she and my ex told John as well. He was distraught. Repeating "you lied to me," as she tried to spin it, but he was letting it out about how much he has defended her and covered for her, and she lied to him too. She was defensive and blamed my ex for telling her things and me for being stubborn. She yelled, "Why can't I just call him Dad?" And finally, after so long, I heard John respond, "Because he is not your effing dad." She started crying and something about his being the one that told she could call me that, and he said he told her she might be able to eventually, but he had told her again and again to slow down. She started sobbing and went to sit on her chair but missed and fell on the floor. Appreciating physical humor to break the tension, I admittedly chuckled and hid my mouth behind my drink. This all led to a lot of sobbing. I said I needed to check on my wife, and as I walked out she was repeating, "I just want him to be my dad too." I came out and he was walking her to the door and apologized. I said not to. They left. He came over a few days later and said they had a long talk at home. He even asked her if she would have dated him if there was never a chance of being in the family. He believed her when she said yes, but she admitted I was a big draw as well. I was the kind of dad she always wanted. My relationship with Sally is what she always wanted, and the way she said it gave John doubts that she loves him for him. I talked about marriage counseling, how his mother and I tried it, and, while it did not save us, it provided clarity and an impartial voice. I pointed out they both like coming to me, but I cannot be impartial, and if they are trying then they need to do it for real. Abby texted asking if I was the one who suggested therapy. I responded with, "Does it matter if John wants to?" She asked why it was so bad. She wants to know what I think, and I just said John is the man whose opinion should matter most to her. They fought due to the text. She agreed to the counseling and the wedding has been postponed. I may have done a dance. So they are in counseling. He said she struggles, but I obviously do not know details. She is pressing for me and Sally to go to a session with her. Sally told her she did not want to hear Sally unfiltered, and I am not interested. Abby has been leaving Sally alone. She stopped texting me except for the occasional general question, which includes some attempt to go deeper. My wife still occasionally spends time with her because she's very into her pregnancy, more so than I like, but it is my wife's call. So that is where we are. Sorry it was so long, but alcohol makes for a poor editor. Update 3. I was told I should do updates here. People have been asking me to and to get into what went down on Father's Day and at their mother's house. I have been extremely busy these last few months, but am enjoying my temporary unemployment and thought of this account because of the recent Thanksgiving drama. I will do an update and then we'll share what happened earlier. Oh, and to whomever made the joke that Abby finally got me to dance, that made me laugh, I shared that with the family. My time has been largely caring for my wife. I tend to dote, I know. We are having a boy. We are really excited, though neither of us really had gender preference. I have raised both and both experiences were wonderful. Now we are discussing names, who we are going to honor. I thought everything had been quiet, but recently found my wife crying and found out I was wrong. Given how busy I have been with work, and my wife knowing I would be free again once we got into this month, my wife has kept this to herself. Apparently Abby has been pushing for one Thanksgiving this year. Things have been quiet with Abby. My son said the wedding blowing up woke her up, and that therapy had been helping. But then this. My understanding is that while John has been talking less with his mother because of all that happened, Abby did the opposite. From my wife's telling, Abby dropped by one day with my ex-wife. My wife intensely dislikes my ex-wife because of lies she spread about my first marriage ending due to infidelity with her, despite there being no infidelity and the linear nature of time making it impossible for us to have slept together back then. Before anyone asks, my ex-wife does not actually think there was infidelity. I would get into that, but I am sure I would sound biased. Anyway, my wife looked at our camera app, saw who it was and called my daughter. Apparently the two of them were keeping things from me because I was working 18-hour days and they did not want me dealing with anything else. I wish they had not done that, but I appreciate the thought. I am really lucky to have such caring people around me. My daughter called her mom and said something that made them leave in a hurry. She will not tell me what, but she smiles when I ask. I called John, but he was dealing with some hard work news, so I just was there for him and left the other alone. The next day Abby came back, alone this time. My wife saw it was her and asked her what she wanted through the door. Abby said to apologize. My wife let her in, she is too nice, and after a nice talk Abby asked about the whole family getting together for Thanksgiving. My wife said of course, she assumed as much. A couple of days later in our group chat we were discussing details, who brings what, and Abby asks what else is needed. I say John already committed and she asked what about my ex-wife, what should she bring? In the time I have known Abby she has never made an intentional joke that funny. So I asked what she was talking about and she mentioned the whole family comment, and my daughter and I both asked what made her think we counted her as family. She actually replied, she is my family. I don't have a dad who wants me, just a mom, and my mom deserves to be with family on Thanksgiving. Sally replied, well, we'll miss you and John then. Abby asks how she can say that. Sally asks how she can be so stupid. John says not to call her stupid and I say that is fair, but there is no real way she thought my wife thought she meant my ex-wife. At this point my wife had filled me in. And then, this is so stupid. She uses my son's phone to add my ex-frigging wife to the group chat. She then thanks us for the invitation and asks what she can bring. As I was typing my daughter beats me to it and asks what she thinks she is doing. She knows she is not welcome, but says it less politely. My wife types, you could not have thought she was included when I said family. Abby responded that she was not coming as my family but as hers. Sally let her mom have it. She already is not talking to her much and said if my ex-wife is there then she is not. I mentioned there was never a chance X was going to come and said I understand Abby and John wanting to go to their mom's house so she is not alone. John typed, plans not definite, we'll let you know. He has since told me that he is not going to go to his mom's place but wanted to tell Abby alone first. All I can think about is the comment about not having a dad who wants her, because it means she is still thinking about me as a dad, I believe. Just a negligent one. I mentioned that to my son and he said he noticed it too and had brought it up at therapy, because family is such a frequent topic, though I obviously do not know the details. Wow, I thought this would be brief but that was a lot. I will get into the crazy stories later if there are people seeing this who want me to. I do not know how posting from here works in terms of anyone seeing it, but this has been good to get out. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Someone needs to explain sunk cost fallacy to John. I genuinely cannot believe he is still with her after the sheer volume of times she has disrespected him, his boundaries, and your family. Maybe this was back in an earlier post, but has anyone really taken the time to reason with him that there are other women out there and he deserves so much better than this kind of relationship? OOP, I had a talk when this started. So did his sister. After the blow-up with the wedding, his sister and I took him out for a game and some time to really talk after. That was when he apparently demanded counseling. I am happy that for now marriage is on hold, at least. He is seeing her a bit more honestly, but is still too optimistic, in my view. OOP needs to let his wife know not to let Abby in when he is not home. OOP. I have asked my wife to never let her in if I'm not here after last time. Well, actually I had already asked her, but after the last incident my wife has agreed. You are exactly correct that she takes advantage of my wife's kindness, though once our boy is here I think she will be very protective and will hold strong. I have told John that Abby will not be holding our baby, at least for the foreseeable future. OOP and his daughter need to have a serious talk with his son about Abby. OOP. His sister and I had a serious conversation with him a little after everything blew up. It seems to be what inspired both his demand for counseling and putting the marriage on hold. He is better about seeing her honestly. His sister said something about Abby having similarities to their mother, which would have been fighting words from anyone else, and I saw the temper that rarely comes out. But then he listened because she clearly put thought into it. I never thought about it. I am proud to have kids smarter than me. I know my boy doesn't come off as a genius in these posts, and fair enough in that department, but professionally he is brilliant. She laid her reasoning out in excruciating detail. He listened though because she was not enjoying it at all. It was sincere. Some seem to have clicked because since that talk he has been different with her. I just am not getting my hopes up. Commenter 2, when two crazies are feeding off each other's crazy, they can start thinking anything is possible. I have a feeling that even if your son leaves her she's not going to go away peacefully. Her and your ex sound like peas in a pod unfortunately. OOP, my daughter really went at him pointing out their similarities. She made her case well and thankfully it shook him up.